Support comes from Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to sustainable and sound conservation of the state's forests, which support more than 41,000 Missouri jobs, resulting in a $10 billion industry. ChooseWood.com.
If you have a smart speaker, you have access to the entire world of NPR and St. Louis Public Radio. All the latest news and all the captivating stories. Activate our voices with yours by telling your smart speaker to play St. Louis Public Radio.
From St. Louis Public Radio. This is St. Louis on the Air.
Wine brings people together.
Yes.
I'm a big fan of that myself. But I gotta say, there's some really strong opinions about Missouri wine.
You were gonna say that.
The people who say maybe Missouri wine has this historic thing, but this is not good wine by today's standards.
So I would say the people who are saying that probably have not been out to Missouri wine country recently.
I'm Sarah Fensky. This past spring, Kat Neville dropped a bombshell. She was leaving Feast, the food magazine she'd founded 11 years earlier. She had been the magazine's publisher for its entire run. And not just that, she was leaving print journalism entirely, 20 years after she and her then partner launched Sauce Magazine out of their St. Louis apartment. Kat Neville's new job is chief curator at the Hermann Farm and Museum, and she also continues to work on TasteMAKERS, the PBS series she launched in 2018. And she joins us today to talk about both of those things. So, Kat Neville, welcome.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm so thrilled to be here.
So, Kat, I was one of those people who was really surprised to hear that you were leaving Feast. What made you decide to leave this magazine that you started?
Well, I mean, it wasn't something that I had planned. It was an opportunity that really kind of came out of the blue. And after some soul searching, I was like, what do I want my days to look like? My partner, Jen, she always says, design your days. And, that's really what I was looking at is, what is the next phase of my life, my career, and where does my heart really take me? And I love publishing. I have been just so grateful to have those 20 plus years being able to be in print journalism. But really, once I started doing the television work, I really started to understand what made my heart sing, and that was being in the field and being connected to people directly. And, when you're the publisher and the editor of a magazine, a lot of the work is behind a computer. Mm-hmm. And I want to put my boots on and be out with, directly working with people.
Yeah, I mean, you were so focused on the business side of that publication. And, you'd always been a writer, but in recent years, you didn't even have much time for writing anymore.
No, I mean, that's the role of the publisher, is to make sure that the business side of the magazine is healthy. And I enjoyed that part of it. But when the Dierbergs came to me and said, we want you to join us out here on the farm, I just was like, I'd be a crazy person to say no. I mean, there's such an opportunity to, because it is an educational foundation. It's a nonprofit, the Dierberg Educational Foundation. And at the heart of that is truly education around farming and rural traditions. And so for me, the opportunity is to take the work that I've done in food publishing and really kind of deepen those threads and those connections through, conferences and events and classes and ways to help elevate and change the conversation about food and farming in our region, not just here in St. Louis, but across Missouri, across the Midwest. Because one of the things that I really came to understand with TasteMAKERS, because that is a nationwide show, and I was crisscrossing the country, doing all these episodes. And, what I saw was that there was a lot more kind of infrastructure in other parts of the country that were there to support the success of small makers and small farmers and artisans. And agritourism was more of a focus. And so I really think that there's tremendous opportunity, with this farm, with the intention of the Dierberg Educational Foundation to really help to support that type of success here.
You talk about the infrastructure that's in place in other parts of the country. industry in these farming regions. What is it we don't have here?
I mean, it is a lot of those opportunities to create connection. I mean, you can have classes, you can have events and things like that, but so much. And one of the things that I've been doing is I've been talking to people in the industry, because I would never presume to say that I know what would help elevate the conversation with distilleries or with farming or whatever. So I'm talking to people who are stakeholders in those different areas of food and farming in our region, and asking them, how can we partner with you? How can we leverage what we have here on the farm to benefit the region and bring revenue and attention and people? And so we're kind of at the beginning of those conversations, but it's really exciting because everyone wants to be part of it. And especially because of where Hermann is located, it's a little bit more central, and so it makes it so that it's this wonderful place where everybody can come and gather. And so we're going to be introducing some of that in the next few months.
And the idea is get people who are in St. Louis to go to Hermann.
Yes. So, I mean, I'm talking, what we just talked about was more on the professional side, but, Hermann is a tourist town, and it, fills up with people who are excited to try wine and spirits and explore history on the weekends. And, I fell in love with Missouri wine country years and years and years ago. And even back when I was at Sauce, we would have Missouri wine issues. It's something that I've always just really been attracted to. And I feel sometimes what I feel like part of my role is just to kind of bring people out there to see what's happening in rural Missouri, to taste the wines and the beers and the spirits that these craftspeople are creating. And just kind of use that as a way to connect the region, because you and I were talking about this earlier. So much of what I think is missing in our conversation today is what we have in common. And I feel like we can find commonality in places like Hermann.
So the wine brings people together.
Yes.
I'm a big fan of that myself. But I got to say, there's some really strong opinions about Missouri wine.
I knew you were going to say that.
And I guess I'm curious if you think those opinions are warranted. The people who say maybe Missouri wine has this historic thing, that this was important back in the day, but this is not good wine by today's standards.
So I would say the people who are saying that probably have not been out to Missouri wine country recently. Number one, there's good and bad wine made everywhere.
Sure.
First of all. And I think that the Missouri wine industry would agree that that maybe 20 years ago, it was not anywhere close to where it is now in terms of the quality of what the wineries are producing. I'm actually judging the Missouri wine competition next week. And so we're going to be tasting 256 Missouri-made wines. And that I've been judging, I can't remember how long now, 6 years, 7 years, something like that. And that experience has really drawn me closer to the industry. And one of the biggest hurdles for Missouri wine is the fact that the types of grapes that grow are not the vinifera, the European grape varietals that most people are super familiar with, like the Cabernet Sauvignons and the Chardonnays of the world. The grapes that grow well here, because we have high humidity, we have really harsh springs. It's not even just that it gets super cold. It's that kind of like this spring where we had a little bit of warm weather and then a super hard cold snap. So the danger of that is that you have bud break. And so once the buds come out, when they think that it's spring and they're coming out and they're all excited, and then you have this cold snap, then that initial growth, it freezes and it kills those initial growth. And so anyway, the vinifera is not as well suited to those types of swings as the type of grapes, the hybrid grapes that grow well in Missouri.
Takes a special kind of grape to succeed here.
But that's not really your question. But your question is Missouri wine actually great? And what I would say is come out to Missouri wine country and taste it, because it's all different. And that's the wonderful thing about wine, is that it's very specific to the way that the grapes were treated in the vineyard. It's specific to the way that the winemaker decides to vinify those grapes. And so, yes, there are a lot of sweet wines that are still available, but I would highly recommend going out and trying the dry wines that are on the list. Norton is our state grape, and it is beloved. But I think that my favorite red is the Chamberson variety. And on the white side, my favorite is the Vignole. If you like a dry Riesling with kind of that pineapple, mango, not sweet, but fruity and really good acidity, Vignole is the way to go.
So these are some good wine recommendations. I actually just made a little note here. This is what Kat Neville says I should be drinking. And when Kat tells you what to drink, you should listen. She really knows her stuff. I want to mention, too, just the historic aspect of this.
Yes.
Because this is a big part of the Hermann Farm and Museum.
Yes, it is.
That this man, George Huesman,
yes,
he played a key role in the development not just of the Missouri wine industry, but of the California wine industry. And he was on site there at the Hermann Farm.
Yes. So his family moved to Hermann in 1839. The first German settlers came in 1837. So they were kind of like on the second wave. And it's a long story, so I won't go too far into it. But his home is the centerpiece of the farm. And he, along with his sister's husband, Charles Tubner, got into the vineyard business, the nursery business, grape growing business, and winemaking. And so George Huesman, he is considered the father, quote unquote, of Missouri viticulture. And he was one of the founding members of the Missouri Department of Agriculture. He published a number of things, including The Grape Culturist. And then you've heard, of course, that Missouri saved the French wine industry from devastation in the late 1800s.
And I have heard this. Is this story true?
It is true. I'm here to tell you it is true. So there's this little louse called the phylloxera bug, and Native American grapevines are naturally resistant to this louse because they evolved in tandem with this bug. So sometimes they have an impact, but usually they're resistant. And so during the transatlantic trade of goods, kind of like what we have now with like native species hitching a ride, same kind of a thing, the phylloxera bug went over to Europe and subsequently started infesting European and French vineyards. Nobody really knew what was going on. Nobody understood why these vines were dying. It wasn't George Huesman who figured out that it was the phylloxera louse, but because he had this nursery and a big part of his stock and trade was grapevines and root cuttings, he sent millions from Hermann over to France, and those were grafted onto the French vines. And so truly those millions of Native American root stocks from Hermann helped save the French wine industry. So his home is the centerpiece of the farm that we're working on today.
And is that a story that you're telling there on site? If somebody's interested in wine, they can go there and see this and learn more about this.
Yes. So we have tours on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays where you can. It's a guided tram tour. It's like 2 hours. And Susan Nichols, who leads the majority of the tours, like her grandfather was one of the second or so I think maybe the second German boy who was born in Hermann. So not grandfather, great-great-great-grandfather.
Great.
Yes,
yeah.
Many greats. So her history there is long and deep, and so she helps lead those tours. And so this story of George Huesman is definitely part of it. But as curator, one of my tasks is kind of building, putting some more flesh on those bones. The tour is amazing, and the farm itself is impeccably restored with period antiques, and it's really, really interesting. But what we're talking about doing is doing more of a true museum-style exhibition that shows more deeply what George Huesman was doing, photos of him. I actually have one of his 19th century rootstocks in my office.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. It's pretty cool. And so we want to build more of that story so that people connect with it more deeply. And then, it's really, when you start to really understand the impact that Hermann had on American winemaking, the world's winemaking, it makes you understand how important Missouri generally has been in kind of the history of winemaking, which is a huge industry nationally. And you mentioned that Huesman ended up in California, and that's true. I think it was in the 1880s, he was offered a position in Napa. And so he went out to Napa and helped to establish that wine industry as well. And he and his wife are buried in Napa.
What a story. And all so close to us right here in the town of Hermann. We're talking today to Kat Neville. She is the chief curator at Hermann Farm and Museum. Just took that job this spring after more than 20 years of working in food journalism here in St. Louis. Founded Feast, co-founded Sauce. She's also the host and producer of TasteMAKERS. That's gearing up for another season on PBS. And we're going to talk about that when we come back after the break. We'll be back here with Kat. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association. Missouri produces wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details on the variety of products made in the state are at choosewood.com.
And now back to our conversation. We're talking today to Kat Neville. She is the former publisher and founder of Feast magazine. She's also the host and producer of the PBS show TasteMAKERS and the chief curator at Hermann Farm and Museum. And we've been talking a lot about the farm. We're going to get back to that in a bit. But Kat, I got to say, the reason that we invited you to come on here is that you were nominated for an Emmy. This is not a local Emmy. This is a national Emmy. This is a huge deal.
It's a huge deal. And I was kind of shocked when I got that nomination. In fact, I was not expecting it. And I had just been over at Still 630 talking with Dave about the spirits industry. And I come home and I'm about to jump in my car. We're going out to Eckert's to talk about orchards. And I get this text from my station relations manager. And she was like, "Congratulations on the Emmy nomination." I was like, "What in the world are you talking about?" And she's like, "No, I'm pretty sure I read the list and you're on there." And so I checked and
there you
I was
are.
on there. I couldn't believe it.
Best culinary series. I mean, you're up against some huge names in this.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing that is just so humbling, amazing, is like people who I deeply admire for the quality of their work. And you know, like Patty Jinich, I mean, she's one person who I think is an icon in being able to tell really deep and meaningful stories about food. Because what interests me about food storytelling is not just kind of the surfacey. Like I want to dig into the culture, the meaning, the stories of the people and how they do what they do. And she does that really well. So being up, next to her and Liddy Bastianich and Ina Garten, I was just like, oh, wow.
This is huge. And
Yeah.
so you find out if you won in a couple weeks?
Yes, July 18th.
So have you just been thinking about this nonstop? It's so hard not to lie awake. What if I win?
Sarah, if I win, that would be
It'd be huge.
Yeah, it would be huge. Probably not going to happen.
But hey, it's an honor just to be nominated in this case.
Absolutely.
It
Oh my
really
gosh.
is.
I mean, here's the thing is, TasteMAKERS is compared to these other productions, it's much, much smaller. I mean, it's I have to give a shout out to Tybee Studios, my production partners, Chris Reuter. He was with me through the majority of Feast TV, did a lot of work with me. And I remember right when the opportunity to launch TasteMAKERS came about, I was like, "You feel like going on this crazy journey with me? Do you want to start filming across the country?" It's like, "Yeah, let's do it." And so we started, first thing was doing a pilot with Gary from Wood Hat. See, the spirits thing is following me throughout. And so that was the pilot, and it was picked up by American Public Television, which is the distributor of the content. And of course, 9 Network is the presenting station, and we got our funding and we started moving. And so we produced 2 seasons, 13 episodes each. So it's the second season that's up for the Emmy. So that is just crazy.
And so you had 170 different media markets picked this show up, and this includes everyone in the top 30. There was some big success for this show. And then the pandemic hit.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, just so much. It derailed a lot. I mean, I have to say, I don't think I would be sitting here talking to you about my work at Hermann Farm if the pandemic hadn't happened. It's one of those things where you're kind of sometimes you need to be able to take a breath, and and there's the good and the bad. So it is disappointing that the funding for the show was kind of derailed during the pandemic, but there's tremendous interest in bringing it back. I mean, the stations are like, would you please bring it back?
So the stations want this back. What will it take to start filming that third season?
Funding. And that's the thing about public media is that especially these types of shows that are not necessarily the core PBS, like the front lines and things like that, everything is independently funded. And so it's up to the producers to go out and get those dollars. And so I have some, really significant irons in the fire. So I anticipate being back on the road shooting toward the end of this year. And so I'm very hopeful that I'll be able to get some new content out in the spring. It takes a while, unlike something that is designed for like YouTube or just a strictly digital platform. There's a lot that has to happen to get it on television. So even So even if I finish the content, within a certain time frame, there still is a lot kind of from the infrastructure of PBS that has to happen to get it on air. But it is in the works. It is happening.
You feel very hopeful this is going to happen.
Absolutely. People love the show. And I think that what I hear from people across the country who just email me and they tell me how much they enjoy this type of storytelling around food. And it's because when I'm telling the story of these makers, quote unquote, that's what I'm really attracted to. As much as I love the art of what chefs are doing, it's the craft of what makers do, and the fact that, maybe you're a cheese maker and you make cheese day in and day out, and you're tending your sheep like Green Dirt Farm out near Kansas City, but it's that doing the same thing over and over and always looking for perfection. And I'm really drawn to that type of a story and that type of a person. And so that's why TasteMAKERS really kind of went in that direction. Also, these products are the foundation of what makes American food so great. And they're so regional. And that's what also I wanted to get across with TasteMAKERS was not just here's a great cheesemaker, let's talk about this cheese, but let's show the environment where they are. Because, I mean, if you've had the opportunity to travel the country, the environment and just the local culture is vastly different from the Pacific Northwest to southern Florida, from Maine to Hawaii to Texas. I mean, and that's what makes it so exciting to be able to travel across the U.S. So I really feel like TasteMAKERS was part food show and also part travel show, because you kind of go along with us as we're traveling.
Absolutely. I can see that having watched it. Like, this is a chance to see people in the country doing interesting things and seeing where they're doing it. It almost fits so neatly with your new role in Hermann. It's almost like you designed this whole thing and had this elaborate 20-year plan, and that is not what happened here.
That. Yeah. Let's just say that that's the truth. No, that's a part of what when this role was offered to me by the Dierbergs, I really did some soul searching, because leaving Feast and leaving publishing, it's something that I've done the majority of my career. That felt like, wait, no, I can't possibly do that. But then when I really thought about what it would mean for me to be able to weave myself into the fabric of a place and be part of the seasonality and be part of the production, and by extension, be able to, broaden my connections with our region's makers and farmers and chefs, because of the role of the Educational Foundation, it just felt like the perfect next step for me, for personally and professionally. Like I big grin on my face when I'm driving, Highway 100 out to Hermann in these rolling hills. I don't care what the weather's like. It's gorgeous every time. And the people who I'm able to collaborate with out there in Hermann they're so dedicated to what they do, and they fundamentally love the role that they're playing on the farm side in telling the story of the history of Hermann. But then on the product side, Derek, who's our distillery at Blackshire Distillery, degree. His dad is the winemaker for Hermann, and his dad has been the winemaker for Hermann Paul for 40 years. So Derek grew up in the cellars at Hermann, and he went to Mizzou, got a viticulture degree, and now, he's essentially working side by side with his dad right there, making these spirits. And also he's the brewer at Tin Mill Brewery. So it's this very interconnected web of people, and I just love being part of that.
So it's such a good story, and our time today has just flown. You've got so much going on. But in our final minute here, I guess for people who are St. Louisans and they've never really thought about exploring the area around St. Louis,
yes.
they go to Florida for vacation. Give us just the short sales pitch on why go to Hermann, why check out this farm.
Why go to Hermann is it's absolutely beautiful and it's fun. I mean, it's the middle of wine country. You can meet up with people who are just woven into the community, do some wine tastings, join us for dinner, stay at the inn at Hermann. It's absolutely, it's on the hill overlooking the Missouri River. But truly, it's a way to celebrate what makes this region, like the kind of the cultural beginnings of the wine industry truly are in Hermann. We were one of the world's largest wine-making regions before Prohibition. And Stonehill, which is right there in Hermann, was, I believe it's the number 2 winemaker before Prohibition in terms of volume of production. So, I mean, this isn't just kind of oh, hey, we make some wine, come out and join us. This is a tremendously deep part of the history of Missouri. And so if you're a history lover, a wine lover, a spirits lover, I mean, it's great. And then as far as the farm goes, I mentioned that we have guided tram tours on the weekends. We also have some self-guided tours where if you're just coming on a Wednesday or a Tuesday, pop by and you can see some of the really beautifully restored buildings that are there. And you can also stop by for a tasting and have some of our bourbon.
Well, that is unsurprisingly a great sales pitch. So, Kat Neville, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Sarah. It's great to see you.
And congratulations again on the Emmy nomination.
Thank you.
We're going to be rooting for you to win.
Thank you.
St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. Understanding starts here. If you learned something new from today's episode, consider leaving us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the easiest way to help people discover our show. We appreciate it. Thank you. St. Louis Public Radio is a member-supported service of the University of Missouri, St. Louis.
Support comes from Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to sustainable and sound conservation of the state's forests, which support more than 41,000 Missouri jobs, resulting in a $10 billion industry. ChooseWood.com.